Welcome to our Wednesday Yachting Luncheon live from the St. Francis Yacht Club. Those of you who are here know that later on you can go on to the St. Franny website and look at past programs on our Facebook live stream, and we're sending this right now to hundreds of other clubs around the world, in fact. Let's see a little bit about our folks who are able to be here in the Yacht Club and look at the incredible view. Where else can you have lunch and look at the beautiful view out San Francisco Bay? That's a great thing. And we also want to welcome our friends from yacht clubs all around the world and, from the council. They're being hosted by good folks at San Francisco Yacht Club and at our yacht club. And let me introduce our flag officers. Kenny Glidewell, our Rear Commodore. Kenny. Our Vice Commodore, Paul Heineken. And our Commodore, Teresa Brandner. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you, Ron, and welcome everyone today. Today's crowd is a little bigger than usual. We've got some guests as well as a guest from the ICOYC, so welcome all of you from yacht clubs around the world. I'm very pleased to host an event for you as well as welcome you to our Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. The topic today is very close to my heart personally and everyone here as well, and well supported. So look forward to the speakers, and again, welcome to those viewers who aren't in the room, but also, again, very interesting discussion today. So thank you, Ron.
Yacht clubs, I mean, think about it. A yacht is a hole in the water into which you pour money. Those of us who are afflicted with racing know that somehow the hole is bigger than the racing boat in the case of racing boats. And those who have wooden racing boats know that there's some kind of active suction going on. So no explaining why we might do these things. Also, the only thing dumber than a guy who owns or belongs to a yacht club is a guy who belongs to two. Some of us belong to three, clearly dumb. None of that would be possible were it not for all the incredible organization that goes into yacht clubs. There is some value. We think to ourselves, you live longer if you're happy and you have camaraderie, and actually that is one of the things that yacht clubs provide. And it's a very clever idea, this council, because getting together and sharing best practices with one another allows us to provide more of that kind of value to everybody else. And so we would not be having this meeting today were it not for the brain power and the foresight of our own staff commodore, John McNeil. Johnny, stand up and smile. John, past president of the council, an active staff commodore at our yacht club. And to say a few words about the council, we'd like to ask the current president, Andy Anderson. Andy, come on up and say a few things. Where'd I lose Andy? Where are you, Andy? Here you go. Great on you, mate. A sailor.
Thank you, Ron, and it's certainly a pleasure as the President of the International Council of Yacht Clubs to be in front of you here today. I think we've got over 20 clubs from around the world represented here. You talk about, running a club. I'm past Commodore of the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, and the only thing dumber than being a past Commodore of the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, I think, is being President of the World Clubs. Seriously, it's a real privilege, and I think the discussions that we're having next door today and over the next couple of days has been really valuable, and the takeouts for the clubs to make your own club stronger, in which case your members get more value, and I think that's the key that we want to share is the passion for sailing, and we all love being out there on the water. We don't want to forget about that, but there are all the other intangibles that clubs bring to the passion of our sport. So, Ron, thank you, and look forward to the luncheon speakers.
Thank you, Andy. A little bit about our future speakers. So you want to come by, let's say, in June. Michael Ellis, the noted environmentalist and naturalist, will be here to talk all about the mysteries of the Mojave, once a lake, now the deepest desert in America. And then if you haven't seen race car driving on Marina Boulevard lately, it's not because Bob Devlin doesn't want it, because he remembers back in the 20s when in reality we had Grand Prix racing. Cars were new, racing newer, and we had races on Marina Boulevard. He'll be here to talk all about that historic set of races right on our Marina Boulevard. Carlo Fucino will be here to talk about the not fastest way to go from Norway to Ireland. He rode in an Arctic expedition, so he'll be here in June to talk about that. In the middle of May, come by to see Malcolm Page, head of U.S. Sailing's Olympic activities. A great, talented person, dominated the 470 class for a decade, won the Worlds out here in 2005. Those of you who were here remember that. On May the 9th, Ron Holland will be here, and we're going to have a Ron Holland boat show. If you've got a boat built by Ron Holland, or you sailed on a Ron Holland boat ever, you're welcome to come. Ron will be here to talk about his new book, Designing by the Seat of My Pants. Steve Tashia will be here in early May. He's the chairman of the America's Cup Hall of Fame. He'll talk about the Hall of Fame process, how they do the good stuff that they do. And next week, Charlie Walther will be here to talk about how hybrid vessels can make our blue oceans even greener. So we have fun speakers and thoughtful speakers coming up soon. I'm reminded that our own Paolo Chiardini, those of us who've known him for a long time, the beloved, great member, brilliant sailor, just won in Miami. Paul, good on you, mate. Let's see. Our speakers today, so those of you who have children, hold your hand. Women, girls who have daughters, hold up your hands. All of you with daughters. Think about what you say to them about getting wet and being cold on sailboats. Think about how you have to persuade them that what you want them to do is going to be good for them. Think about how when they start to pull the main sheet in and say, I'm not used to pulling things that don't move, that it will someday be different. Think about when they're really, really at the back of the fleet and they don't do that well. Think about what it is that you would say to motivate them. Well, were they here today, they could hear what you'll get to hear and you'll be able to pass along. Because our speakers today represent those kind of kids who've grown up. It is the case that Nicole Breault, a young kid in the East Coast whose Blue Jay was named, let me see, would it be her BRG Blue Jay was named Pickles. So you got to be a kid to name your boat Pickles. Pam Healy, great young sailor as well as a child, had an El Toro, and her El Toro was named Woodstock, and Kostecki had an El Toro named Schrader, and they both made believe that they were characters out of a Peanuts cartoon strip. There are all these ways that kids get engaged in sailing, and it grabs their heart like it has many of ours. Very few of them will get to the heights of our speakers today were it not for the encouragement of many parents like those in this room and junior sailing developers all around the country. So if you want to be a world match racing champion or a fleet champion or a national champion like Nicole Breault, you can tell them we know somebody who's done that, and you can be on that path by just having fun as a kid on a sailboat. And if you want to be an Olympic medalist and a world champion, as is Pam Healy, the same advice goes. All of our kids have the potential to do that. And please get as much inspiration as I have, and those of us who are members, with our next two speakers, Nicole Breault and Pam Healy. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting us today to speak on this very current and exciting topic. I just attended the U.S. Sailing Leadership Forum and was on a panel discussing the evolving role of women in sailing, and I'm really excited to share with you my takeaways and my own experiences in the sport and in leadership. I grew up on the Bay Area and learned to sail at a very young age. I had an incredible competitive racing career that took me all over the country and all over the world. I competed in my first world championship when I was 16 years old in Holland, and then again in Sardinia at the age of 18 in a 420. To say I got the bug for high-level competitive sailing at a young age is an understatement. I campaigned twice for the Olympics in the women's 470 class, and was successful in 1992, sailing with best friend and teammate J.J. Feder of San Diego and winning a bronze medal. JJ is equally passionate about making sure the pathways and opportunities are readily available for women in this sport. I grew up at a time when there were very few female role models as competitors or leaders, which was challenging. Fortunately, that is different now. Today I have the luxury of free time, and I'm in a period of my life where I want to share my love of the sport and enthusiasm for mentoring and committee work with juniors, women, and developing athletes. I serve on the board of directors here at the St. Francis Yacht Club with 5 other unique and strong women. Our Commodore, Teresa Brandner, is our first female Commodore in our 90-year history, which is very exciting. We also have 3 women, including myself, that are voting directors among a board of 11, which is also historic for our club. We have a dynamic board that represents our diverse membership of over 2,300. We have women that run our race office, run our docks, chair our membership committee, chair our executive race committee, and our beloved premier event, the Rolex Big Boat Series. I personally think the St. Francis Yacht Club is a leader in supporting women, and there are lessons here at this club that can be shared. Besides serving as a director, I am also on the U.S. Sailing Youth Advisory Board and newly formed Youth Council. I'm an advisor to the St. Francis Sailing Foundation and serve on the Grants Committee. I am vice president of the U.S. Olympic Sailing Alumni Association, and I am a member of the membership and junior committees here at the club. I am also on the board of SF Fast, which is going to be the new home of the U.S. sailing team over at Treasure Island. When I have some free time, I love to mentor, volunteer, and teach women how to sail. I enjoy paying it forward and supporting women and helping them reach their goals in the sport, no matter what they are.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the St. Francis Yacht Club. I'm delighted to be here as Pam's sidekick and to discuss the ways that we can engage women in sailing more. I assume that most of us in the room know the wonders of sailing. Like many of you, learning how to sail changed me, influenced the person I am today, and as I continue to do a lot of sailing, it helps shape my community of friends and my world. I grew up in eastern Connecticut and learned to sail on the waters of southern New England, starting at age 2. My family went on cruising adventures to mystical places like Block Island and Cutty Hunk. When my brother and I were a little older, my parents joined the Nyack Bay Yacht Club, enrolled us in junior sailing lessons, and bought us a Blue Jay. It was blue, but we painted it British Racing green and called it Pickles. Most of us know that when you get on a boat at such a young age, you are bound to develop natural talent if you stick with it. But it takes time. I remember well how tough it was at the start. And Ron alluded to some of those encouraging things parents have to tell their kids. I have one distinct memory of panicking while rounding the green can, marking a rock we called Dead Man's Reef. I was so scared that I smashed into the coach boat and then into the can itself, but luckily not the rock. Another time, my dad sent me off the dock by myself in a fresh northerly wind, only to find himself sprinting around the club breakwater to stop me before I smashed into those rocks. A few summers later, the International 420 had become a thriving youth class in our part of the country. And in 1986, Nyack Bay Yacht Club hosted the 1986 Nationals. There must have been 50 or 60 teams entered, and some of the older kids in our club, including my brother, were vying for top spots. But for me, it was my first 420 regatta. I had a friend from school crewing for me whose only qualification was that we played soccer together. In the very first race, we managed to get off the starting line near the pin end, and a big left shift came in. Billy Healy, a couple years older and already a rock star, tacked to port and ducked us while helpfully calling, "Nicole, you should tack." We took his advice and found ourselves rounding the windward market first. Yes. Unfortunately, we capsized right after hoisting the spinnaker, and for the rest of the regatta, we really struggled. But that day forever changed me. Finding myself leading the pack in a race full of talented sailors opened my eyes to my own potential. When someone gets a taste of real success, they want more. I continued to race I-420s for the next few years and into college, winning 2 national championships and traveling to 6 world championships in Europe and Japan. I sailed for Yale, captained both the women's and varsities team, and achieved All-American honors. Here comes a glam shot. The point is, my journey and Pam's demonstrate how simply the opportunity to go sailing and to learn and get positive feedback as you develop the skills leads to more sailing and meaningful engagement in the sailing life. In college, I scheduled classes around sailing practice. My first job was teaching sailing. As a young adult, I turned teaching and coaching into a career as a history teacher. I continued to race, but I also coached junior and high school sailing and judged college regattas. And years later, sailing continues to shape my choices. I met Bruce Stone racing and eventually moved to San Francisco to team up with him as both tactician and wife, which some could argue is the same thing. I've found myself a new home base, the St. Francis Yacht Club, where I invest time and energy into the J22 fleet, doing a lot of match and team racing and helping to implement programs that bring the wonders of sailing to more people.
So if policies towards women have already changed, and if women's participation is already growing, then why is it important to continue discussing ways to engage women in our yacht clubs and sailing organizations? For starters, we all know the sport is facing some challenges across the board in terms of growth and retention. There is a huge drop-off at age 25 in participation. People nowadays lead really busy lives, boat ownership is dropping off, and the number of women participating in the sport hovers around 30%. And yet at the same time, at the very top end of the sport, at the Olympic level, we will now have 7 out of 15 members of the 2020 team be women. And by 2024, the International Olympic Committee is calling for 50% participation by women in all sports. So as intimidating as this may sound, it demonstrates a need for a roadmap to support high performance and Olympic level training programs regionally, so we can get there, particularly programs targeting more female athletes. Now I know I may be speaking too high up in the clouds, but if you look at it from my experience perspective, when I began sailing, there were no dedicates for fleets for women, and now there are 5. I admit that I am biased towards the Olympic experience and the training and developing as an athlete into the very best version of yourself. Being on that starting line at a regatta where everyone is committed to perfection, where there are no do-overs, is an awe-inspiring experience. You can't help but be motivated to bring that back to your home clubs and share it and inspire others. If you work backwards, we need to address this locally and build and retain our female sailors if we are going to meet these long-term goals together. It starts simply with just getting women out on the water and into leadership roles at your clubs. Young girls walking down the hallways of your club need to feel welcome and supported on all levels. The aesthetics and images in many clubs are outdated, masculine in nature, and not reflective of our ever-evolving female-friendly climate. It might sound simple and obvious, but if women are out on the water racing or cruising around, it is only logical that young girls will feel like they belong and that it's a fun place to be as well. They need to see that down the road they are valued and that there is something to look forward to as adults in the sport. We can make small changes that will have a huge long-term impact and retain our female sailors in our clubs. At the recent U.S. Sailing Leadership Forum, I was on a panel addressing women in leadership and getting more women out on the water. The room was packed with standing room only, and the Q&A could have gone on all afternoon. We had such an amazing response, and it proved that there is such an appetite for programming for women all across the country.
Here at the St. Francis Yacht Club, we have a fleet of J22s, which is an amazing resource. We use the fleet to host team races, match races, and other challenge and all-star regattas. A few years ago, we began to develop programs that would expand access to the boats to more members and other Bay Area sailors, and then specifically programs targeting women. We created 3 separate Wednesday evening fleet racing series in the early spring, midsummer, and late fall, with open entry, so long as a club member of record led each team. In addition to running races, we provided low-key volunteer coaching to help sailors adapt to the specifics of the J22. The program has been very successful, and if you stick around, and you can watch the action tonight from our race deck. Or better yet, you can even walk the docks and see if you can get a ride. I don't have the exact data, but I can confidently say that the outreach aspect of the J22 fleet has attracted new members to our club. The fleet racing series has reinforced the membership benefits here. We also introduced a Learn to Sail clinic for women on the fall weekend of our stag cruise, when the guys clear out of this clubhouse and head to Tinsley Island. Spearheaded by our junior sailing director, Brent Harrell, we put together a light, fun program and assembled an all-female team of volunteer coaches with experience in the J22s. Coaches each sailed on a boat with 2 or 3 students and introduced them to sailing basics while cruising around the bay. The response was very positive, and it gave rise to a growing interest among women to have more opportunities to sail than just 1 week in a fall. Last year, we took the successful clinic model and applied it to a much longer women's sailing course, spanning 6 successive Tuesday evenings alongside the Wednesday night racing. We recruited members to come coach a team of beginner sailors for a couple of hours after work while enjoying the sunset. Afterwards, coaches and students gathered in the club to debrief and socialize. Since we were piloting this program for the first time, we capped participation at 9. We built out the course to include a collective entry in the Wednesday night racing, so participants got to race 2 times with an accomplished skipper coach. We knew we were onto something when registration opened and it sold out in 12 hours. It was like that awesome rock concert that you couldn't get tickets for. We were also able to schedule qualified member coaches to meet our needs for every sailing session, something which the program really depended on for safety in our somewhat challenging sailing venue here. In all, we had 11 people answer the call and devote time to teach. 11 volunteer coaches for 9 sailors. We found that pulling these women in, making their interest in learning central, and reassuring them with a low-pressure scenario with a competent onboard guide, and immersing them in the whole experience, both on the water and hanging out after sailing, was incredibly powerful and rewarding for them. What's more, we found it to be incredibly powerful and rewarding for the coaches also, both men and women. Getting a chance to share their skills and knowledge in the sport they love and watching it transform these women. Some of whom had little to no experience, but others who had been around sailing for much of their lives, but they'd really just been told what to do on board and never really understood why. This year, we expanded our women's spring course to 16, and we had 19 volunteers helping to coach. And many of them wanted to come back even though they weren't signed on for the next week. They really wanted to come and help. Just as last year, there were smiles on the faces of all parties, rain or shine. Through sailing, they all gained a stronger sense of belonging in the St. Francis Yacht Club community.
Last summer, we brought back the Tinsley Island Women's Sailing Camp. It was so incredible. Everyone learned at their own pace, and by Thursday, everyone was sailing independently in a laser. We had yoga, swimming pool time, craft projects, healthy food, and some wine. We even got permission to break into some of the husband's stag cruise wine lockers. Women learn differently than men, and you need to design a program that makes all levels comfortable. I got in the boat with others, did demonstrations, sailed alongside, and made people follow me and play follow the leader. I was very hands-on and figured out how to personalize it for each person. One student in particular had me get in the 420 with her until she perfected her downwind jibe to the tune of 42 times. I felt like I'd been put through a washing machine, and she felt like she had reached the summit of a mountain. My feeling is that however you make it work at your club, be hands-on, make it fun, socially engaging, and have women-only classes. I'm happy to say that we will have the Tinsley Women's Camp again this summer at the end of July. The Tinsley Camp and the spring course Nicole described attracted participation in part because of their scheduling formats. Women feel pressed for time between families and careers. Having a concentrated week like the Tinsley Camp requires them to unplug from it all to go do something for themselves, and it requires their support network to step up and allow them to do so. In the other case, having short evening classes in a series that they can fit into their busy schedules makes sense too. If the classes are on the weekends, it becomes more challenging, in particular for mothers with children. At the Leadership Forum, we discussed the need for childcare when it comes to engaging women in sailing. Some clubs were going to set up solutions for babysitting like co-ops or daycare rooms. I know from my own experience, as much as I love the competition of racing, it was very challenging when we were racing our 3 kids. The cost for mommy to go sailing on the weekend was incredibly high and frankly unaffordable and not worth it to me. The time it takes to properly practice, prepare, and race is overwhelming compared to other sports and expensive. Every club will handle this differently, but why not consider offering mother-child classes or childcare for little ones while mommy's out sailing? These are just thoughts, but I'm sure your membership engagement and satisfaction will go through the roof.
Pam and I have shared a bunch today about ourselves and our accomplishments in sailing. Our attention has been to emphasize the connection between sailing and leadership. Long ago, we both got hooked by sailing opportunities that changed us and caused us to devote ourselves to pursuing greatness in the game. A side effect was becoming vested in the sailing life, and we immersed ourselves in the sailing communities that we could access. We believe that sailing itself is the key to healthy sailing organizations. Historically, sailing was a male sphere of work and recreation. As a result, our yacht clubs and other associations were founded by men and led by men. In our experience, both personally as young sailors and from our observations as coaches and mentors, Pam and I know that sailing opportunities have the same caliber effect on women. Sailing can enrich their lives, and in turn, they will engage in the sailing communities that surround them. When those sailing communities welcome women and encourage their involvement, they will invariably benefit from the diversity of skills and interests those women possess.
I am excited to discuss leadership roles opening up for women in the sport. This year, 30% of the U.S. Sailing Board of Directors will be women, and in October, Corey Sertle will take on the impressive role of president, the second woman to lead our governing federation. Corey is a Rolex Yachtswoman of the Year, Olympian, world champion that is deeply committed to making a difference as a leader. We are in very good hands. I have found that as a director here at the St. Francis Yacht Club, I bring a set of skills, enthusiasm, and talent that fill an invaluable space at the table. My experience of high-level competition and perspective is more big picture at times, but is needed as a steward of this club. When I need support or something reframed, I ask questions from one of the other leaders. I have found that the men at this club are committed to teaching me and other women to be informed. It's my responsibility to fill my gaps and be responsible for my areas of growth, but the men also have to be committed to pull women up in order for our clubs to evolve into their very best versions of themselves. I have had the benefit of several incredible male mentors that go out of their way to teach me and learn from me as well. We can do more than chair fashion shows, children's Christmas parties, put hospitality baskets together, and check people in for regattas. You just have to teach us. Years ago, Harvard did a study on board dynamics that is very telling. It has been determined that if you have a minimum of 3 women on a board, you will raise the collective intelligence of the entire board. People love that. This is not because women are smarter than men, or vice versa. It's because women typically have a higher emotional IQ and look at different issues differently from different angles. I have seen this in action as we discuss issues collectively and shape a solution. Everyone participates. I would like to encourage you, when you go home, to select a woman at your club and mentor and support her. We can't get there from here without understanding all the nuances of club governance and club politics unless you lend us a hand and pull us up. Now it's springtime, and that means nominating season at most clubs. One thing I'd like to ask all of you when you go back and meet with your committees to select your leaders for the upcoming year is that you look at possible female candidates, but please don't stop the conversation by saying, so-and-so would be great, but I heard she wants to start a family, or her husband's job is demanding, or her job is demanding, or she's getting divorced. Let us tell you what our bandwidth is. When I was a director at the San Francisco Yacht Club across the bay 2 decades ago, we had a newborn, a 2-year-old, and a 4-year-old. My husband, Craig Healy, and I made it work because it was an amazing opportunity for me, and I didn't want to say no and pass it by. As an aside, my husband is also an Olympian and world champion, and there's no way I could have competed at the level I did or be involved in leadership and committee work without his support. He gets it. Our Commodore here at the St. Francis Yacht Club, Teresa Brandner, has a 4-year-old daughter and a demanding career. She is one of the most member-facing Commodores the club has ever had. She's devoted to being on site, at committee meetings, and engaged with the membership. Sheryl Sandberg, in her book Lean In, says women move through life on a jungle gym. Sometimes we are pulled in every direction, and sometimes we can climb directly up. Please let us determine what our limitations are and how far we can push and stretch ourselves. Another topic I'd like to share with you while I have a captive audience of Commodores is that it's time to look at the way your membership categories work in your club. I've been reading various club bylaws as of late for stimulating late-night reading. And membership categories are as varied as club cultures. I don't know what the answer is, but when someone comes up with a magic formula for spouses to feel like they have equal rights of membership as their partners, we might see great things happen and make real progress. I think membership confidence, engagement, and recruiting will skyrocket, and we will all be kicking ourselves for not instituting these new policies earlier. J.J. West, our former GM, told me that women make 70% of the decisions regarding discretionary spending in a relationship. I think boat ownership will grow as couples both equally invest in their respective clubs, and I think nominating committees will have a deeper bench of qualified members to chair committees and go into leadership roles. Personally, I can only see an upside, and I hope you will take this into consideration. It will take time, but it's worth the mental exercise and may help your club grow in the future.
A few weeks ago, I attended the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon that featured Jocelyn Nash as the speaker. For those of you who don't know her, she is one of the great pioneering women of competitive sailing back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. She inspired many other women to get out and race over her lifetime. In my lifetime, I've watched women's sailing become institutionalized at all levels, and I have done battle with an increasing number of talented female competitors. And when I look out in the audience, I see both men and women leading sailing organizations and yacht clubs as flag officers, board members, and committee chairs. It is clear that we have come a long way in building a more gender-inclusive sailing world. It shows in the attitudes and actions of men and women alike. Yet it's also clear that we have not reached gender parity across the sailing world in racing or in yacht club engagement.
It was so interesting to discuss the progress that has been made for women together. I am 54 years old, 9 years older than Nicole, and our experiences as women are really different. We agreed that the 9 years between us felt more like decades in terms of the progress which has been made that has been very positive. We both sailed in college and were able to race in the women's, open, and team racing divisions. We have both competed all over the world, just at different times. One interesting thing is that when JJ and I came home from winning the 470 World Championships in Brisbane, Australia in 1991, the late Staff Commodore Limbaugh and his wife Lois thought that I should be awarded the Yachtswoman of the Year award. We soon came to find out that there wasn't an actual award here at the club. So Mrs. Limbaugh created one that now sits outside in the main entryway. She's here. I won it again in 1992 after the Olympics, and there is now a roster of incredible female sailors from this club, including Nicole in 2016. What really shows progress is that in 2017, Nicole won the Yachtsman of the Year award at our annual meeting. I was sitting in the front row, so proud and weeping as she made her humble acceptance speech, stating that she always has considered herself a sailor and as an equal. It was a mindset that I was so proud to see articulated. The round of applause that night from the membership and the standing ovation she received was validation that she is a highly respected sailor. We know that growing your women's sailing program is not going to happen overnight. But we hope that if you go back home with the lessons learned from our programs, you will feel motivated to give them a try. The low-hanging fruit that will nourish your sailing organizations is to support women's sailing, events, and leadership opportunities. You don't need to have women with the sailing credentials the two of us have in order to create engaging programs. You just need to have a few key people to roll up their sleeves and be willing to put in the time and get women out on the water. Everything else will fall into place. Nicole and I are really committed to helping your club, so please ask us questions and let us know how we can help. Thank you very much. We did it.
Sure you're on?
This is better. I like the Q&A.
I like the sound I'm getting. Bob Sky, what's the sound here? Okay. So, welcome again to our Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Trying to get rid of feedback here. Live for the St. Francis Yacht Club. My sound happening here? I want to acknowledge our good friends at Sailing Illustrated, without which we wouldn't be able to do as good a job with the Facebook live streams. Tom Eamon and Julia Whittakin. Yes, Tommy, good going. Terrific. Competitors make us better. Competitors make more fun on the race course, and they make us better. Serena and Venus Williams would not be as good as they are were it not for the incredibly loving and equally competitive relationship they have with each other. They each spur each other to higher performance. Our yacht club would not be as great as it is were it not for the incredible friendly and loving and powerful at times competition we have with our North Shore neighbors, the great San Francisco Yacht Club. Stu Riley, are you in the room? Stu, are you here? So we recognize their contribution to the game in San Francisco Bay and to sporting and to sailing as a sport overall. They've had many, many world champions, and both of our clubs share members, have many members who share membership with both, myself included, and we basically love each other as great competitors and make each other better. And they are co-sponsoring the council's event this weekend, so terrific. Thank you. So on the subject of inspiring competitors, let me ask first Nicole and then Pammy, tell me which women sailor, which women, period, do you admire the most? And then later, which women sailors? First, which women do you admire the most?
Well, Pam, of course. No, actually,
Yeah, it's working great.
when I was growing up, I told you some of those stories. JJ and Pam were out there doing their thing, and they were definitely on my radar. They were inspirational, and I have to say that I was really fortunate to attend and sail for Yale University, and JJ was an alum there, and she actually came east to coach us when I was vying for the New England Championship, and it was really amazing to have someone of her stature come and give us time, and I have to say that I'm not just kidding when I say JJ and Pam.
Great, thank you. Pammy, tell me women that you admire.
I really admire Corey Sertle. I admire Betsy Allison for everything that she's done with the Paralympic team. Dawn Riley, everything that the impact she's made with Oak Cliff Sailing. Katie Pettibone. Sally Barco, I think, is incredible, what she's done with Team Magenta and getting women out of the water, and they're just a force, those women. So I really admire the women that raced when I was racing, and now they're doing something to make a positive impact in the sport. Those are the women that I admire.
So we're all about sailing. We come to the yacht club all the time, but what about other sports? Are there any other sports that you play in? Nicole?
Well, growing up, I played soccer, basketball, softball, and sailed, and we also went skiing. So you name it.
Everything?
We tried it. We even
Pammy.
liked floor hockey in PE class.
Pam?
As a little girl, I played soccer, and then I really focused in on sailing and would ski a little bit. But when I was training for the Olympics, I didn't ski at all because I didn't want to risk injury. And now I love to play golf. That's my favorite thing. I had to do something with my competitive energy, otherwise I'd drive my family crazy. So I took up golf.
So in the year that you sailed the most, Pam, how many days on the year did you spend on the water? How many days on the water?
When JJ and I were training, we would train, we would train 7 or 10 days and then take a little time off. And then we would get to regattas a week early and really focus in on that venue. So, I mean, it was 3/4 of the year. The last 2 years before the Olympic trials, we were incredibly focused. I mean, it was all we did. We lived and breathed it. So.
Over 250 days a year?
Yes. We were very dedicated.
Nicole, likewise. Tell me a year that you spent a lot of time on the water and how many days on the water for our young listeners to pay attention to what it takes to be a great sailor.
Well, in my family, we approached practice with this in mind. No matter what, it's very valuable to have time on the boat. And when we were trying to make advances in our abilities and our score lines, we would go out and practice in any condition, including absolutely no wind. And we would kind of try to come up with some reason why it was valuable when you were just drifting around, and we would capsize on purpose. And I think in the end we were testing the limits of the boat and how much kinetic energy we can put into it and all that stuff. So I think it's very valuable. And I trained a lot as a kid. We practiced 4 days a week in college, and any other event that I've done since, it's been very important to get out and practice. And we start with boat handling, and then we go to more specific things related to the venue that we're going to be racing in.
So while I'm going to continue to ask questions, if you have a question, put your hand up. John Bechtel has a mic. John, stand up for a second, and we'll bring a mic to you. And we'd love to have as many questions as you might have from the audience. And Julia has something on the live feed. Go ahead, Julia. The question is? Comment is? Go ahead.
Yeah, Liz Bayless says.
Liz Bayless is asking.
Thank you for bringing up all these important issues and articulating some great solutions
So Lizzie
Thank you,
Bayless,
Liz.
a great sailor.
Thanks, Liz.
Acknowledge your comments. Great. So we've been talking about the fun and the learning experience of sailing, but what about scary moments? So Pammy, the scariest moment or a scary moment on the water?
It's this cool, scary moment. So we were racing in the 470 World Championships in Brisbane, Australia, and it was so windy, and I'm not just telling a fish tale here. It was so windy. It was 48 knots. And the wind, I'd never seen it like this before. So a whitecap would come, and the water would wash off the top of the whitecap onto the next whitecap. So it looked like there was fog. So you couldn't even see the waves. And it was really scary. We didn't put up our spinnaker, obviously. We tacked around the reaching mark. I'm dating myself saying reaching mark. You don't have those anymore. And we finished the race, but it was incredibly eerie and scary. And we made it all the way into the dock and then capsized right at the dock, which was so silly.
How'd you do in the race?
We got third. But I like a lot of breeze, and I've always been really confident in a lot of breeze, so that's something that made me a really intimidating sailor. It's one of my weapons.
Nicole, a scary moment.
Well, when I was teaching junior sailing out on Fisher's Island, New York, we developed a motto that you have to want to be scared. And it got the kids going out and doing things that, they were a little bit nervous about doing, like getting out on the trapeze for the first time. So I have a lot. I was trying to come up with one specific thing, and I get scared all the time. Like last weekend, we were match racing J105s against the San Francisco Yacht Club, and we got into a jibing duel, and we were Chris Perkins had his sights set on us, and he wanted to get an offsetting penalty, and we had like 3 jibes in a row with like intense luffing matches and just trying to keep clear, and it gets the adrenaline going. It's fun.
Who won that match?
That was the one match that we won.
So we have a question from the audience, staff commenter of the Coyote Point Yacht Club and the St. Francis Yacht Club, Bruce Monroe. Bruce.
Okay, thanks Pam and Nicole for a great talk. This question comes from someone whose sailing experience goes back way when there were very few female sailors, competitive sailors, in my experience. So my question is, aside from having a better IQ, what are the advantages of being a female sailor?
I think women move really well on boats, and we're not as clunky and heavy-footed, and especially especially on trapeze boats, women move really well, and so I think we're really connected to where our feet are and how we're positioning our body. So I think that's an advantage that women have, and I also think that we're, women are really great at multitasking. We all know that. And so I think processing all the information on a race course, it comes at you really quickly, and being decisive is something that women have a special talent for.
So Nicole, you have a degree from Yale in education. Talk about using that educational experience to design clinics. How is designing a sailing clinic? What do you get out of your education that helps you design really productive sailing clinics? The design of them.
Well, there's no substitute for time on the water, and experience is the best teacher. But there are things like don't bite off more than you can chew. Pick a small, like 1 or 2 topics to cover in a session, and design drills around that, and then make sure that afterwards you emphasize what was learned about that. Don't talk for too long. As I hold the mic. But yeah, people can learn pretty quickly, and you just have to make sure that you don't overload them in one particular way. And so those are all teacher tricks.
So Pam, talk a little bit about FAST at the Treasure Island Sailing Center and the promise. Give us a few hints. We don't want you to give away the whole store, but what's the opportunity there?
I am so excited about this. I wanted a U.S. sailing base out on the West Coast for decades, and I think we're just so lucky because we're going to have this amazing sailing center where the U.S. sailing team is going to come out and train, and they're going to be able to pick, where they want to train that day depending on what they want to work on. They can go over to the Berkeley Circle, they can come up the city front, they can go into the South Bay, and it's also going to be great because they're going to be right next door to the Community Sailing Center, and we really need to find out ways to create solid pathways to include more diversity in our sport. And so these will work really well together hand in hand, and I'm really excited about that. I've done some.
This is a great program.
It's a
This
great
is a great
program.
program. Explain what FAST, the acronym, means.
Oh gosh, where's Peter Sternberg? Oh, Carolyn Patrick, SF,
Facility for Advanced.
Sailing Technology. Thank you, Fast USA.
That was Carolyn Patrick. Thank you, Carolyn,
I know, I did
president of
too.
the St. Franny Foundation. Facility for Advanced Sailing and Technology. Those of you who are excited about it, as many of us are. Colorado has a skiing center for U.S. skiers, and we as a nation benefit greatly from that. America will now have a sailing center here on this most inventive of bays, most ingenious place to sail with currents and wind variations all over the place. So it's really, really a great activity. And congratulations for being part of that, Pammy. It's a very exciting initiative. Talk about pre-race regatta planning. We've been talking about the difference between men and women, but talk to me, Nicole. You've had an amazing sailing career. If you're getting into in the Nations Cup, talk to me about your training regimen in the Nations Cup. And when you're sailing with both men and women, how do you deal with any of the differences of your team? Give us your regimen getting into a series like that.
Well, the first thing you have to tackle is team building, and there's a lot of accomplished, capable sailors out there, and in match racing you have to fit them into the boat that you're sailing. There's weight maximums, and there's different skill sets that might be stronger in some sailors versus others, and you have to kind of put that all together and consider the group dynamic. People have personalities, and you want to make sure that the vibe is positive, and driving for whatever the collective goal is. So that's like a huge amount of work, and you have to do a lot of communications, and you make invitations, and people can't always sail your first choices, so you have to kind of manipulate things so that it comes to the best that you can do. And then you have to prepare, and you have to practice together, because a lot of people sail with a lot of people, and you don't always have the same team. So you have to try to gel and really feel comfortable on the boat together and feel like you can do anything. And so people have busy lives. I sail in amateur divisions, and people have work and they can't always be available for practice, but you have the right people when they make time. And our Nations Cup a couple of years ago was really a big undertaking. We were going all the way to Vladivostok, Russia, and luckily the open division was the entry from our neck of the woods was Russ Silvestri, and he and his team they're from here, so we went out and practiced a lot. And so there's a lot of work that goes into it. Not all sailing related. You have to do a lot of administrative stuff.
So Pammy, talk a little bit about the pre-race in the days when you guys were. How many world championships did you and JJ win together?
Just one.
One world champion. Well, that's a pretty good
big
thing.
deal. We won
Who's
at
won
the
a world
Olympic year.
championship here? Paolo? Who's won a world champion? Hands up. Okay, here we go. She as well. So a question from the audience.
With regard to women feeling welcome both on and off the water, what is being done to address the issue of sexual harassment and sexual assault?
what is being done to address the issues of sexual harassment and assault in our world of sailing on and off the water? First of all, what's your experience of it? Explain any experience you've had of it in terms that are appropriate for the environment. And yeah, have you had it? Experienced it?
I'll start. So there was a second part of Ron's other question that's a little bit related. Like, what's the difference between men and women and team orientation and all that stuff? And my personal experience is we're no different. Like, it's all those other factors of driving for a common goal, working together, and your personalities and predilections all go into that. And I've always found that treating everybody equally and as people who are not intending to ever let you down is a good vibe on board. And I've never really experienced any direct sexual harassment myself. I've probably been fortunate. And I also think that, like, we're all individuals, and in the sailing world, there's we like to joke around, and people's feelings probably could get hurt, but I seem to enjoy the banter and never feel like anything has targeted me. So I don't really know if I've answered your question, but in my experience. On
an organizational level.
Oh, maybe Pam, you could speak to that more.
Oh, I know U.S. Sailing takes this very seriously, and I think if there was an issue and it was brought to their attention, they would see it through to the end. I know they take it very seriously.
So please join me in welcoming our speakers today, National Match Racing and Fleet Champion Nicole Breault and Olympic medalist Pam Healy. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us for the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon live at the St. Francis Yacht Club. The meeting is adjourned. Good on you. Good on you. Nicole,